bravo, you've totally hit the nail on the head. This is exactly the same type of behavior, sentiment, and lack of accountability and almost permission that we saw this past week on Capitol Hill by the presidents of major academic institutions and Ivy League schools that basically cannot bring themselves to say that we don't support calling for the genocide of Jews. We don't support calling for Israel's destruction. And this sort of open tolerance and lack of consequence for anti-Semitism and for anti-Israel language is really what is trickling down into these, both the hearings we heard on Capitol Hill, but as well as these isolated examples, and this isolated example after isolated example coming happening within a larger context of a tolerance for anti-Semitism from the top down. And what's interesting about Oakland in particular, why it's worth noting, is that Oakland is, very much a city, that's lawless. They don't have a police chief. They have one of the highest crime rates in California right now. Most of this is because Oakland saw new leadership come in that was funded by, far left, ultra progressive organizations such as those supported by George Soros. And these are the exact same far left, radical progressive organizations that are supporting anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, hatred towards Jews campaigns right now. So it's the same funder pool. It's the same philosophy. It's going from the schools to the academy to City Hall. And the result of this is sort of a lawlessness on the street that has found its perfect storm in anti-Semitism.
And by the way, just to know that only yesterday, public school teachers, we're talking young kids, not universities, public school teachers there in Oakland presented this pro-Palestinian lesson as part of this unauthorized teaching. And we're talking actual BDS material in the curriculum. But we will, save it for another day, because I do want to get your take on this, David, before we have to bid farewell. We had a lively debate here behind the scenes in the studios on whether shaming those anti-Semites online has some sort of a boomerang effect, as in, if they lose their jobs over this horrific incident, and by the way, they were not fired as of yet, they're not going to say, oh man, I must have done something really wrong. They're going to load on more hate. On the other hand, serving the cause or not, why should I care? If you're an anti-Semite, be a jobless anti-Semite.
I would kind of lean towards you, Ellie. I'm also into the jobless anti-Semites. I mean, there needs to be an aggressive demonstration of consequence for these behaviors. Last week, for instance, you had that example of the teacher here in New York who was sort of hiding in her own classroom because a mob of students found out that she was Zionist or Jewish and wouldn't let her out of the classroom. Well, what's supposed to happen to these kids? You know what I mean? Are they supposed to walk away scot-free? And if they're doing this to teachers at 14, 15, or 16, what's going to happen to them when they're 24, 25, 26? If we don't, and it won't necessarily be against Jews at that point. It could be against anybody. But because they got away with it as teenagers in a school in Queens, they probably think they can do this for their whole lives. So I don't have a problem with shaming people, and I think there should be consequence from the top down. But the key thing is the consequence, and what's missing here must come from the top. We saw it with a lack of accountability and a lack of leadership this week on Capitol Hill with the university presidents, and now we've seen it in Oakland, and the results are Jews hiding behind closed doors, terrified to use the most basic public services, and that is intolerable.